students, welcome to our chemistry unit, and this unit's a pretty important unit, and so I'm hopefully you've got yourself all organized and up to date from our biology and you're ready to learn a little bit of chemistry. For this week, the modules number 10 and number 11 are going to be basically some grade 9 review. So chemistry is one of those subjects that what you learned in grade 9, you need to just build on it for grade 10, and so what we're going to learn on our distant learning grade 10 chemistry is going to be things you're going to need for grade 11 chemistry. Okay, so hopefully you can keep yourself working away, and I'll try to keep it as organized as possible. What you can see on the screen right now is one of the YouTube series that we're going to use, and only this series for chemistry. Tyler DeWitt has an excellent selection of chemistry videos. I use them in grade 11 chemistry and also in grade 12 chemistry. So I'm just going to pick and choose the basic ones that we're going to use for our chemistry in grade 10. And I just wanted to show you that that's where they are. So for this module number 10, I've got 2 videos that are attached to the Google Classroom. And I'd like you to spend a little bit of time watching them and see what you remember. Do you remember about the periodic table? Do you remember about basic atomic structure? That'll be important for what we're going to do during this module and also next module where we look at drawing some Bohr-Rutherford diagrams, if you remember that from grade 9, and basically looking at the difference between an atom and an ion. Okay, so here we go. For this module, there are 3 pages that you're going to want to print if you can, and if you can't print, that's okay. You can just make little summary notes based on the notes that you can see. I've got all of the solution sets posted together, all right, and I'm going to keep them attached to module number 10, so you can just download the solution sets, and as we go through the unit, note that there may be some pages in there that we're not going to cover because we're trying to pare it down, but all my solution sets are there for all the topics from grade 10 science. Okay, so the first 3 pages in the notes that are together are for this module. There's one that is the chemical review, so chemistry review from grade 9, classifying matter, physical, chemical properties, and changes. That's the first note. The second note is a periodic table, and then the third note is just looking at element symbols and see what you remember about the symbols and how to spell some of the element names. If you can print a copy of a periodic table, that would be ideal. If you don't have a printer and you don't have a periodic table anywhere at your house printed out, here's a hint. Have a look to see if you've got one in your grade 9 binder. Everything that's on that periodic table, you could just keep it and use it as review. So really have a good look around. Ask your brothers and sisters, your mom or dad, see if you've got a paper copy. If you don't, you can simply make a little summary of the periodic table and add in some of the highlights. You'll notice that in your textbook, there is a periodic table at the back. So you could use this digital copy of the periodic table, just get the PDF, and maybe you can use one of those PDF writers where you could just write on the PDF of the periodic table. You're going to refer back to this periodic table page the entire unit. Okay, so if you can get yourself organized and find the periodic table that you want to use, then you'll be all set and ready to go. Okay, so here we go. The first thing I want to go over is a few of the review things from grade 9, and I've really pared it down. Can you remember what matter is? That's the first basic thing you want to think about. Remember that matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. Okay, so it has a unit to do with the amount of matter in regards to the mass of it, so a gram or a kilogram, and it takes up space. Don't forget that solids, liquids, and gases, right, they're all matter because they have particles in them that make them up. And we're going to transition to thinking about matter in terms of the amount of things you have to looking at molecules and atoms and all of those combined. Different atoms have different masses, and so different compounds obviously have different masses as well. Okay, you remember that from the periodic table. You can look at the atomic mass. You can see that the mass of hydrogen is different than the mass of copper. That has to do with the parts that are in the atom, the protons and the neutrons in the nucleus of the atom, and the electrons, remember, don't have any mass at all. We'll talk about that in the next module. Okay, what is a physical property? of matter and a chemical property of matter? Well, it comes down to what it looks like and how it reacts. Okay, do you remember what matter is? Matter is a pure substance. It could be a pure substance like an element or a compound, or matter can be a mixture. So if you think of it this way, I've got some molecules here that I made, and a pure substance would be, for example, if I have some water molecules, okay, I have one type of particle, water, in a beaker together that's contained. That's a pure substance. It has a specific melting point, a boiling point, specific physical properties of that compound. Okay, you could be talking about a compound like a molecule, and we use those terms interchangeably, although there really is a bit of a difference. Okay, when we start talking about ionic particles, I'll refer to them as a particle as opposed to a molecule, but all of those words really mean compound, okay? So there's a bit of terminology that goes along with that. So think of it in terms of a molecule. So what if I had a compound that is completely sodium chloride or completely H2O? I could also be talking about an element. So what if I had hydrogen gas or oxygen gas or copper or sodium? Both of those are pure substances. One type of matter, whether it's a compound or an element, okay? And you can't break them down any further if it's an element, and if it's a compound, well, you still have to be able to look at that and say, I've got one container that has only water molecules in it. Okay, now mixture. What's the definition of a mixture? Something that can be separated into its parts. So remember, all matter is either going to be in the category of a pure substance or a mixture. And if it's a mixture, let's say I've got some methane and I've got water and I've got oxygen gas and I've got hydrogen gas. I've got it all combined together in a mix. And then you can separate that out into its individual components. Okay, so it's just talking about the fact that I've got matter, but if you put different kinds of matter, different kinds of elements and compounds together, then you have a mixture. If it's a solution, and this is a tricky one to think about if you think about air, the air in the room is a solution, right? You've got oxygen gas, that's this one right here, and you've got hydrogen gas mixed together, but it only looks like one thing. We call it in chemistry a phase. It's got one phase, okay? Think of it as if you've got salt dissolved in water, just mix it up. It looks like all one thing, but you've got more than one thing in there. So it's certainly a mixture. It's a mix of different elements and compounds put together, but you could physically separate those, right? How would you separate a beaker filled with salt and water? Well, you would increase the boiling point, let the water boil off, because water is going to change state at 100 degrees Celsius between the solid and between the liquid and the gaseous state, but the salt doesn't boil until like 1,000 degrees Celsius. So you can take away the water and you're left with the salt. So that's what we talk about when we talk about being able to separate a mixture into its parts using a physical means like boiling, maybe it's distilling or taking a magnet, whatever it happens to be. Okay, the next two common definitions we learn about in chemistry are physical property and chemical property. Simply, what does it look like and how does it react? So things like conductivity, density, luster, and texture are physical properties. Chemical properties, something like combustibility. Does it make a precipitate, right? That's that word that means, does it make a solid or does it decompose? So how does it react? That's a chemical property. When we look at changes, and you did this in grade 9, right? You talked about a physical change versus a chemical change. So you want to think about it, does it make something new or not? Do you remember what this molecule was called again? This is our water molecule. We've got 2 H's, 2 hydrogen atoms, and 1 atom of oxygen making 1 molecule or 1 compound of water. And if I have a pure substance, so I've got only water in my beaker, and I increase the temperature, what's going to happen? These water molecules are going to move faster and farther apart. They're still water. That's a physical change because it's just a change of state. I haven't made anything new. I still have water molecules. Whereas if I have a chemical change, remember, you need to break these inside bonds within the molecule. We call those an intramolecular bonds. okay? And I've got H2O that turns into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. So you've made a new final product, and when you do that, that's your chemical change. So hopefully you can remember that. All right, that's it for the grade 9 review on that page. If you look to the next page, we're going to do a little bit of review on the chemistry and the periodic table. So let's see what you remember from the periodic table. Okay, I just want to switch for a second here.